Hello everyone, it's Two Sheds here, and for this video, rather than looking at someone from our distant past, let's take a look at someone from modern times. That's right. Today, we're going to be talking about the person who most recently left the presidency behind, Joe Biden. A true politician with over a 5-decade-long career. We're going to be looking at his whole life story, including his Senate service, vice presidency, and yes, even his presidency. Now, whether you love him, hate him, or feel indifferently towards him, he's got quite the story to tell. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Here's the story of Joe Biden. So, Joe Biden was born on November 20th, 1942, in Scranton, Pennsylvania, to Joe Sr. and Catherine Biden. His family was fairly well off around the time of his birth, but suffered many setbacks during his childhood. In the early 1950s, the area they lived in fell into financial decline, and his family had to move to Claymont, Delaware in order to find better work. There, his father worked as a car salesman and was able to help his family stay afloat. Young Joe attended Archmere Academy, where he played both baseball and football, the latter of which he was rather skilled at. While he struggled academically, he was actually voted class president both his junior and senior year. Interesting foreshadowing of what was to come. After graduating high school in 1961, Biden enrolled in the University of Delaware, where he also played football, though dropped that after his freshman year. Biden graduated from there in 1965 with really good grades. He received a double major in history and political science. So during his senior year, while vacationing in the Bahamas, Biden met Nelia Hunter, a student at Syracuse University. The two hit it off pretty quickly, and Joe moved to Syracuse both to be with her and to enroll in law school at that university. Biden and Nelia married on August 27, 1966, and eventually had 3 children, Bo, Hunter, and Naomi. Before he got that far, though, he continued law school, and despite a plagiarism scandal, he was eventually admitted to the Delaware bar. He graduated 76th in his class of 85. Remember that, it'll be important later. In 1969, when he started out as a lawyer, Biden first identified as a Republican, interestingly enough, even having assisted Governor Russell Peterson in his campaign while still in law school. However, after landing a stint as a public defender at a law firm headed by a staunch Democrat, Biden tamed his views a bit and eventually shifted towards being a Democrat himself. However, he quickly found that the salary was not what he hoped it would be, so in 1970, he tried his luck at running for city council and shockingly made it in. His time as a council member, however, was unremarkable, but he had high ambitions for being as young as he was. After being on the city council and not having much power for the most part, Biden decided there was nothing for him there now and decided to really make history. More specifically, he decided to be the youngest person since John Eaton to ever be elected to the Senate. In fact, if elected in the election of 1972, he would barely meet the minimum age to be in the Senate. Still, though, he won over the local Democrats, and miraculously they chose him as the candidate. His main opponent was sitting Senator Caleb Boggs, who was popular, and in fact, no Democrat but Biden even wanted to face him. Maybe that's why it was so easy. Throughout the summer of 1972, when campaigning was truly intense, Boggs was the clear favorite, but barely put in any effort. Biden, on the other hand, fought hard every day, gaining advertisements in papers and on radios. Biden was sure Biden his time in the back of the polls, but on election day, the state of Delaware was shocked. Biden just got past the finish mark, winning a remarkable 50.48% of the vote to Boggs's 49.1. Biden was very ready to celebrate his victory if it weren't for December 18th, 1972 would have been a normal night for Biden, but the cruel beast known as traffic had other plans. Biden's wife Nelia and their 3 children were on Delaware Route 7 when a tractor driven by Curtis Dunn unexpectedly collided with their car. Nelia and 1-year-old Naomi sadly didn't make it out, but his 2 sons lived to tell the tale. This is a huge blow to Biden, perhaps even the biggest of his life, and he even considered stepping down as senator-elect, but was persuaded not to by Majority Leader Mike Mansfield. On January 3rd, 1973, Biden moved to Washington and started his first term of many as a senator. After Biden took office in the Senate, he quickly proved a handy asset for the Democratic coalition. He was particularly strong on pushing for health care reforms, which have been a big part of the national conversation since the introduction of Medicare. One of his more controversial stances, however, was his stance on integrated busing. Federal policy was deeply unpopular in his home state of Delaware, and while Biden personally favored civil rights, his voter base wanted him to support other ways of thinking, even going so far as pushing for forbidding federal funds for transporting school buses. A lighter thing he did, however, was during the election cycles of 1976, when he was one of the first office holders to formally endorse Georgia Governor Jimmy Carter for president. Biden backed the right horse there, as Carter pushed ahead of the unpopular Republican government. The 2 of them would keep a close working relationship throughout his presidency and would remain close allies for the rest of Carter's 100-year life. Someone else he'd be close to for a long time also entered his life during his early Senate years. In 1975, Joe Biden's brother set him up on a blind date with Jill Jacobs, a substitute teacher and recent divorcee. The 2 were quite impressed with each other and continued dating even after the fact. While she was at first hesitant to marry, fearing what being married to a federal level politician could do to her reputation, the 2 eventually married at the United Nations Chapel in New York City on June 17, 1977. In the same state where his first marriage took place. Jill helped take the place of a mother figure Biden's 2 sons were looking for after the accident, and she and Joe had 1 more kid together, Ashley, to complete the family. While Jill kept her education career going even after the marriage, she would often be a big help to Joe in his political career, which was rising to new places. So in 1981, while the Republicans took control of the Senate for the first time since 1955, Biden was offered to join the Senate Judiciary Committee. Upon accepting the offer, one of the first bills he pushed for was the Comprehensive Crime Control Act. While it took him until 1984 to pass due to a hostile opposing Senate blocking, when it did, it was widely praised as one of his best achievements. Biden would continue to be tough on crime throughout the rest of his long Senate tenure, and in 1987, he was even named the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee after the Democrats controlled the Senate once more. Alongside passing many more crime laws, Biden also oversaw 2 Supreme Court justice nominations, one of which was Robert Bork, who Biden and many other senators feared would attempt to overturn various civil rights cases. They were able to reject him in his hearing, but one he wasn't able to stop was that of Clarence Thomas. He was a controversial nomination due to previous misconduct involving an intern. While Biden did everything he could to oppose Thomas's appointment, it wasn't enough, and he was confirmed. As of the making of this video, Clarence Thomas continues to serve on the court. Biden, however, sought a higher office. In June of 1987, not long after taking the head of his committee, Biden declared himself a candidate for president in the following year's election. At first, he seemed the clear favorite due to his strong record, widely appraised stances, and appeal to youthful voters. However, with more fame came greater scrutiny, and people began to notice the fact that some of his speeches were plagiarized. He was accused of stealing from various other politicians, such as British opposition leader Neil Kinnock and former Senator Robert Kennedy. On top of this, it was also found out that he had lied about other aspects of his life, a big one being that he had graduated law school at the top of his class. But as I told you to remember, he graduated 76th in his class, 85. After all this came out, he dropped out of the race for president that September. The Democrats would go on to decisively not win the presidency for the third term in a row. The stress of such a badly managed campaign took a toll on his physical health as well, and in February of 1988, he suffered a major aneurysm requiring surgery and keeping him out of work for most of the rest of that year. When he returned, however, he was determined to rehabilitate his image. During the 1990s, Biden became one of the greatest international figures from the United States. He was particularly interested in the Baltic area once the Yugoslav wars broke out. When President Bill Clinton took office, he quickly sent Biden to work on a peace deal with Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic. Wow, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. In general, Biden considers his involvement with easing tensions between the United States and Serbia arguably his greatest achievement as a senator. Biden couldn't keep Milosevic a non-threatening figure forever, however. In 1999, the Kosovo War reached its height, and he and fellow Senator John McCain pushed for President Clinton to use all necessary force to put it to an end. This culminated with the NATO bombings between March and June, which was a decisive victory, but remains highly controversial due to the high civilian death toll. The 21st century, however, would really put Biden's international skills to the test. After the vicious September 11, 2001 attacks, Biden became one of the strongest supporters of the war in Afghanistan in the Senate. One of the biggest elements of his rhetoric was how Iraq President Saddam Hussein was the biggest threat to America and the whole world. In an effort to eliminate him quickly, he voted in favor of authorization of use of military force. He even gathered witnesses to give an infamous testimony which misrepresented Saddam's power and even alleged his possession of weapons of mass destruction. Throughout the mid-2000s, the war largely went nowhere helpful, and Biden regretted voting for it, and accused the Bush administration of largely mishandling it. He pushed hard against the troop surge of 2007, believing that further military efforts beyond what was already there was not an appropriate step. His stances pushed him to try again, something he hadn't tried in years. In early 2007, being fed up with the war on terror, Biden once again declared himself a candidate for president. He used his foreign policy record to appeal to voters, but there was one problem. By now, Biden was in his 60s and wasn't as appealing, at least enough to draw a large amount of people to his side. Other Democrats in the running, particularly Senators Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, blazed past him in the primaries, leaving him in the dust. After a poor performance in the Iowa caucus in January of 2008, Biden dropped out of the race. Not before, however, he caught the eye of Obama, the eventual nominee. He met with Biden, wanting to put him in the administration. This clearly went well, as on August 22nd of that year, it was announced that Biden was the official Democratic nominee for vice president. Biden was seen as a fairly uninspired choice, but his competition, Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, brought far more negative attention to the opponent's campaign. Outside of the debate, Biden was not showcased much, though he did run for re-election in the Senate just in case the election didn't go well. On November 4th, Biden won both elections. On January 15th, 2009, however, he resigned as a senator, concluding a tenure of 36 years. As crazy as this sounds, at the time of his resignation, he had been a senator for most of his life. He would, of course, continue to serve his country even further, as on the 20th, he was inaugurated as our 47th vice president. Upon moving into number one observatory circle, Biden tried to distance himself from the controversial outgoing Vice President Dick Cheney. He did, however, make his presence known. He frequently made state visits to Iraq, continuing to project his stance on the war. On the domestic front, Biden and President Obama were seen as a dynamic duo of sorts, as they were seen working together more than any previous president and vice president pair. Obama often handed Biden important tasks, like trying to tame the hostile Congress during a government shutdown in March of 2011. His influence also helped him get various economic bills passed to Obama, which alleviated the recession that had started before his term began. Biden also headed the Gun Violence Task Force, where he pushed for gun control solutions in response to the school shooting epidemic of the time. After a successful first term, he sought nothing more than to continue. Despite rumors of the party replacing him as their nominee for vice president with Hillary Clinton, who by now was the Secretary of State, Biden was once again the Democratic nominee for vice president. Finding himself and Obama in a close heat in the polls against the Republican ticket, Biden pushed himself as hard as he could on the campaign trail this time around. As a result, absolutely humiliating Wisconsin Representative Paul Ryan in his debate.
Ronald Reagan.
Now you're Jack Kennedy.
Ronald Reagan.
After that malarkey, as Biden would probably put it, Obama and Biden were re-elected, and he continued his vice presidency. Despite a strong first term, Obama kept Biden behind the scenes more this time around. His main policy that he championed this time around was violence against women, which was becoming a bigger talking point than ever during the 2010s. On the foreign side, he continued to watch carefully over Iraq, as well as other areas in the Middle East. Towards the end of his term, he visited Serbia again, where he apologized for the bombing that he had called for in the 1990s. During his second term, Biden was seen as a potential successor to Obama, and even teased the idea of running for president, especially with the approval rating of the once popular Hillary Clinton dropping. However, on May 30th, 2015, his son Beau died after a long battle with a brain tumor. Knowing he wouldn't be able to give it all on the campaign trail or, if elected, in office, Biden announced later that October that he would not be a candidate for president in the 2016 election. Biden's vice presidency ended on January 20th, 2017, being succeeded by Indiana Governor Mike Pence. With the exception of the few days between his Senate resignation and vice presidential inauguration, this was his first time out of office in 44 years. Despite this, Biden remained one of the most popular figures in the party, regularly commenting on the issues of the time, such as LGBT rights and cancer research. He was also one of President Donald Trump's greatest critics, and some outlets called for him to run for president again after all. This culminated on April 25th, 2019, with an announcement many were waiting for. That day, Biden announced, due to his concerns with the Trump administration, that he would be a candidate for president in the election of 2020. While at first he faced some stiff competition from Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, by March of 2020 he had overtaken him and become the frontrunner. Also around that time, the COVID-19 pandemic was hitting the United States very hard and would continue to for the whole campaign season. Many voters wanted to reject the sitting government, giving Biden an advantage. By August, he became the Democratic nominee for president. California Senator Kamala Harris was chosen for vice president, being the first woman of color to appear on a major party ticket. By then, his opponent, the aforementioned President Donald Trump, was becoming increasingly unpopular due to his ineffective handling of the pandemic, costing thousands of lives, as seen in the wide unrest that was ravaging most of the country. Still, though, both sides had devoted followers, and either victory would not be without controversy. But on November 3rd, 2020, when votes were cast, Biden prevailed. He received 306 electoral votes and 51.3% of the popular vote. As heated as this election was, this was actually the best showing in the popular vote against a sitting president since Franklin Roosevelt. Speaking of the sitting president, Donald Trump straggled behind, receiving 232 electoral votes and 46.8% of the popular vote. Just shy of his 78th birthday, Biden was the oldest president to ever take office up until then. Would you believe that wasn't even a certainty during the transition? On January 6th, 2021, the day Vice President Pence was to confirm Biden and Vice President-elect Harris as the winners, President Trump hosted a rally with his supporters in Washington, D.C. During the rally, he alleged that Biden had only won the election due to voter fraud and encouraged everyone attending to attack the Capitol building. The crowd quickly turned into a riot and broke into the building, ending the session before the votes could be approved. Upon learning of the attacks, Biden was naturally shocked and outraged and addressed the nation as it was ongoing. Thankfully, the riot was eventually put down by local police, though not after 5 deaths and over 100 reported injuries. Biden was approved in the early hours of the next morning, marking the only time in history the transfer of power from an outgoing and incoming president was non-peaceful. But either way, on January 20th, Biden was inaugurated as our 46th president. Trump did not attend the ceremony, making Biden the first president since Ford to not have the outgoing president attend. The COVID-19 pandemic was still going fairly strong by the time Biden became president. In his first few months in office, he pushed hard for it to come to a stop. For instance, he ordered the country to rejoin the World Health Organization and approved the American Rescue Plan Act, which gave economic relief to those badly affected by the pandemic and also helped put out more vaccines into production. Throughout the rest of his presidency, the pandemic became less and less severe before it finally was declared over in May of 2023. In a rapid departure from Trump's administration policies, Biden also introduced the Build Back Better plan, which helped return many struggling Americans back to normalcy, as many were displaced by the pandemic in more ways than just illness. Throughout his early relief efforts, Biden and his team received considerable acclaim from the public, and it seemed like things were on track for a successful presidency. But there were other issues Biden wasn't able to handle as effectively. So by the time that Biden took office, the United States had promised Afghanistan that it would pull out by May of 2021. Biden, however, in a controversial move, decided to delay the withdrawal until September 11th, the 20th anniversary of the attack that sparked the conflict in the first place. While the process really started to pick up that July, on August 15th, the Taliban created an offensive, retaking control of the country. Biden then ordered that the remaining soldiers assist the established government at the last minute, leading to one final battle. On August 26th, at Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul, a bombing took place, killing over 150 people, including 13 Americans. Biden finally finished the withdrawal 4 days later, ahead of its schedule, but many, including the Senate itself in a vote of condemnation, seriously disapproved of the handling. Also, by the time Biden assumed office, border crossing between Mexico and the United States, particularly of an illegal nature, was at an all-time high. Trump's handling was very controversial, with his border wall being a serious point of contention during his presidency. On his first day in office, Biden suspended the construction of the wall indefinitely and ended the state of emergency Trump had previously declared. Biden's immigration policy, however, came under fire as well, as many were unhappy, as while Biden encouraged legal pathways, the high amount of border crossing only went up further throughout his term. Biden commissioned Vice President Harris to work with Mexico to find a strong solution, but with many going on to dub her as his border czar. Many Republicans, however, pushed Biden to return towards Trump's type of policy, even pushing for the border wall construction to resume, especially after they retook control of the Senate in 2023. Mexico, however, was not the only other country on Biden's mind. On February 24th, 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin shocked the world by seriously escalating his war with Ukraine to a full-on invasion. Biden, however, a strong champion of Ukraine, did not take kindly to this. He immediately imposed sanctions toward Russia, encouraging many other nations to do the same, forming a coalition in the process. He also persuaded Congress to give billions of dollars in relief to the Ukraine people to help them with the war effort, and even sent weaponry to help it fight the good fight. NATO quickly got on his side and encouraged the expansion to keep Russia at bay from going further than just Ukraine. With his encouragement, Finland and Sweden finally joined after years of anticipation for their inclusion. He also expressed support for Ukraine itself to join, though as of the making of this video that hasn't happened yet. Regardless, thanks to Biden's relief, the country managed to stay afloat for years longer than anticipated. While the recovery from COVID-19 made the economy rise pretty high during his first months in office, by the end of 2021, inflation reached a huge high and will get higher throughout 2022 and even into 2023. Particularly of concern to the average American were gasoline prices and grocery prices, which reached pretty astounding highs throughout his presidency, the worst in fact in over a decade in some cases. While many blamed Biden for the high cost of affording essential items, Biden approved several economic bills, such as the American Rescue Plan Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. He also showed that he cared for the average American's struggle during the United Auto Workers strike, when he showed up to join a picket line of protesters in Michigan. However, no amount of picketing or economic recovery seemed to lower food prices, and many started shouting at the top of their lungs, "Let's go, Brandon." On October 7th, 2023, the world was shocked yet again when Hamas, an Islam-centered movement, attacked the Gaza Strip in Israel following 75 years of tension over ownership. Despite many strongly pushing for his administration not to, Biden sent millions of dollars in relief for Israel. In a bold move, Biden even made a visit to Israel to address the situation personally. Despite the situation being seen as a humanitarian disaster, Biden continued to increase his support throughout 2024. This, however, ended up being quite out of touch, as those people I mentioned before who pushed against his action only went harder, with Free Palestine becoming a central issue of the time. That May, however, Biden was able to reach a ceasefire proposal, with many hostages being held in Gaza being released afterward. The actual situation, however, remained very tense and will likely to continue to be that way for a while. Biden faced many kinds of enemies throughout his presidency, but in 2024, however, he'd prove his own worst enemy. As mentioned before, Biden was the oldest person to ever serve as president up until his term. Many were wondering whether Biden was truly capable of serving a second term at his age. In April of 2023, however, he announced that he would once again be a candidate for president in the election of 2024, with Kamala Harris likely continuing to serve as vice president. Biden, however, had a staggeringly low approval rating, with many Democrats encouraging him to step down. Biden continued to campaign throughout the first half of 2024. Things came to a head on June 27th. On that historic day, in a debate with former President Donald Trump, the favorite candidate for the Republican nomination, Biden gave a debate showing most considered shockingly bad, even by his supporters.
What I've been able to do with the with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
His age showed through more than ever, and he struggled to get his points across. While at first he insisted he would continue to stay the course, it became obvious that there was no way he was going to win. On July 21st, he withdrew his candidacy, becoming the first sitting president since Lyndon Johnson to decline to be a candidate for re-election despite still being eligible. Vice President Harris replaced him as the Democratic candidate for president. She, however, would go on to lose the election to Trump, bringing Republican control back to the White House. Biden's term finally ended on January 20th, 2025, after which he moved back to Wilmington, Delaware, where he finally retired after a long career. So that's where we end things for now, as unlike the subjects of my previous storytime videos, our person of the day is still currently living. So, regardless of how you feel his presidency went, I think he's got a story worth telling, and I'd like to thank you all for watching. This has been Two Shads. Hope to see you next time.